China has brokered a new deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Now, how will that really impact us here in the West? To chat about it in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. So, Lisa, bottom line, it's a new deal, but really, how concerned should we be about this new deal and the leaders of these three countries meeting?
Yeah, it is a huge deal. And, it's funny. I was on NBC News on Friday when the news broke, and the host, prompted the segment with, "We have great news out of the Middle East." It's not so great. And I'll outline why. This deal was brokered by China. China swept right in and took the place of the United States, who usually would be the one to broker such a deal between two powers in the Middle East. And not only did China, were they able to broker this deal. Remember, China selling weapons to Russia. China is also working with Iran's regime to sell more weapons to Russia. I mean, this is really our enemies getting together and colluding behind our backs. Well, now in front of us. Why did Saudi Arabia go along with it? That's the question everybody asks. Well, President Biden has been snubbing Saudi Arabia for a very long time. And look, this was a pact not really based on friendship, but based on opportunity, right? So Saudi Arabia looks at this and says, look, we have so much to gain from trade with China. We already are doing that. Remember, they met a few months ago and we all were talking about the deals between China and Saudi Arabia. Well, now they realize that realigning themselves with the West is not an option while Biden is in office. So why don't they try realigning themselves, at least with Iran's regime, to see perhaps an end to some of these proxy wars that they're fighting each other. People talk about this as the unfreezing of tensions for the last 7 years. It's not 7 years, it's 44 years. When the Iran regime came in, they wanted to spread their brand of Shiite Islam. Saudis want to spread their brand of Sunni Islam. And the two basically have been at war for over 4 decades, trying to be the powerhouse of the Middle East. So now China's saying, look, let's put our differences aside and all be powerhouses. And that's exactly why we have this deal.
So what's the new deal really all about? Is it more about trade between Saudi Arabia and Iran?
It will ultimately be that. But, the secondary obviously will be to end these wars and to put aside these animosities. Now, will we get to the secondary and tertiary parts of this deal? That's yet to be seen, but it doesn't look like it, decades-long animosities will be put aside for a couple of good deals. What it will do is, in fact, what you said. Iran being the biggest winner here, it lets them off the hook economically, right? It gives them another lifeline. Here they are having a very short list of partners with whom they can trade with. And now you add Saudi Arabia to the list as well and gives them more opportunity and opens them up to the Middle East.
Lisa, let's talk a little bit about China here. President Xi Jinping was awarded his third 5-year term, extending his rule. Now, the vote was 2,952 votes to 0. Yeah, there's democracy in action. Now, a 2-term limit was defeated and deleted from the Chinese constitution, meaning that Xi could remain in power, for the rest of his life?
Well, it seems like when you're a dictator, anything is possible, right? And it's funny you said he was awarded. He awarded himself many, many more years in power. And that's exactly what's going on in China. Obviously, it's a dictatorship and he loves being in power. He loves gaining all this power. And look, if you're, is sitting in China as a lawmaker or somebody who has a vote or has a say in this, you're looking at Xi Jinping really winning for China. You look at what's going on, here in the West and all the issues we have here domestically in terms of immigration, in terms of fentanyl, in terms of our schools. Look, our kids are learning about pronouns and their kids are learning, Calc 3 in the 8th grade. I don't know, I'm exaggerating, but you get the point. They have a focus on growth and we don't. And for that reason, this deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, for example, brokered by China, is just one example of the many advances that China is making. This being a more tangible and visible advancement, and there's so many more that we're not talking about in terms of its military technology, cyber technology, and the list goes on. Obviously, in manufacturing, I spoke to a friend over the weekend, and he has an electronics business. And I said, how has everything been with China? He said, I used to travel to China all the time, but I can't not work with China. They're the only ones who know how to make my products. They have a monopoly. They have a monopoly, and we need to talk about how we're going to combat this threat going forward. Not in the next year, but I'm talking about decades ahead. How are we going to combat the threat that is this growing advancement of the Chinese empire?
Now, still with China, the United States Treasury has imposed sanctions on Chinese businesses supplying an Iran firm selling military drones to Russia in its fight with Ukraine, Lisa. Now, one of these companies, Hangzhou Koto Machinery Company, has been under sanctions since 2008, so this is nothing really new.
No, it's nothing new, and it's just symbolic. How obviously just the serving up this slap on the wrist to say that they're doing something. And look, the Biden administration is obsessed with the war in Ukraine. Look, nobody wants war in Ukraine or anywhere else, frankly. But what happens is they're looking at the Iran regime, put so much money into terrorism all around the globe for so many years, and they've done nothing about it. Right? Look at Hezbollah, what they've done to Lebanon. Look at what the Houthis have done in Yemen. Look at what the insurgencies have done in Iraq. And look at the money that has gone to Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza and the West Bank, and the list goes on. But they haven't done anything about that. The Iran regime continues to kill innocent protesters that are on the streets. They've done nothing about human rights abuses. They continue to march forward with uranium enrichment. They've done nothing about that. But oh, wait a minute, they're giving parts to Russia to supply weapons to Russia to use in Ukraine. Oh, now we have to start sanctioning them. Look, in one breath, they talk about sanctioning Iran's regime, and in the other, they loosen up all of these sanctions, and they provide opportunity to give these lifelines economically to Iran's regime. So, it's kind of like a push and pull, but at the end of the day, sanctions will only work if they're enforced, and we know that. And right now, they're not being enforced. So we can talk about sanctions all we want, but it doesn't look like it's working in these capacities.
There's a recent report that Russia may be funneling U.S.-made weapons captured on the battlefield in Ukraine to Iran, Lisa. Iran's military engineers then can analyze the equipment in the hopes of recreating it.
Look at the cycle, this vicious cycle. Exactly right. So there are weapons that we are providing in the Western world, Europe and other nations as well. I know Canada is involved, in providing assets to Ukraine. Then those weapons are then being taken over by Russia and then sent back to Iran for reverse engineering, copying that, and again being sold back to Russia and other countries. So we're basically helping advance military technology in all parts of the world for our enemies, if that makes any sense. And by the way, taxpayer money going for these efforts. So it's mind-boggling how when you connect the dots, and I thank you for asking that follow-up question, because it just shows us where these billions of dollars, I mean, everyone talks about this war in Ukraine. Again, nobody wants war anywhere in the world, and we want this to end as soon as possible. We're hoping that Putin just puts down his guns and decides that he wants that off-ramp. Until we get there, the Biden administration is set on giving billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine, and Zelensky is just asking for more and more. All he does is make these world tours. He begs for more money, and I don't know if you've heard that he wanted to speak at the Oscars and make another plea at the Oscars, but he was rejected this time.
Wow. Lisa, we like chatting about miracles here on Miracle Channel. Well, following the devastating earthquake which rocked Turkey and Syria, a Syrian man who was thought to be dead actually woke up at his own funeral?
This is a crazy story, and if you believe in miracles, I mean, this is just tremendous. This man was pulled out of the rubble. He was believed to be dead at the time he was pulled out. So you have to imagine what conditions these, paramedics aren't just calling dead, very, very quickly. But he was announced dead, taken to the morgue, prepared there. They take him to his funeral, and that's when he wakes up. And thank God he woke up at the moment that he did before being buried, because God forbid, that is not a thought that anybody wants to have. But what doctors believe happened is that, sometimes the heart stops and then it picks up its own rhythm. It's basically the body does what a defibrillator does, is start the heart. It basically pumps the heart again. It jump starts again. So that's basically what doctors believe happened, but absolutely a miracle. Imagine all of that. And I'm sure the family is so incredibly thankful. He is being observed at a medical facility right now to make sure he gets stronger and better. And we wish him many, many long years ahead.
Unbelievable. Wow, that's great. Lisa, there are reports that American Democrats and progressives have attempted to undercut Israel's conservatives. Now, in what way? Are they trying to maybe discredit former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yeah, so we actually did a story last week at the Foreign Desk talking about this exact moment where there are NGOs. These are nonprofit think tanks or government groups or any sort of organization, humanitarian organization or other, that is getting grants, basically taxpayer money from the government here in the United States, and using that money to support anti-Netanyahu protests that are currently going on the streets of Israel. What's going on in the streets of Israel, if I just want to give a quick little brief on that, is that the leftists are against these conservative overhauls of the judiciary. So they want to change some of the laws. There hasn't been a conservative majority for a very long time in Israel, and particularly now. Bibi Netanyahu was basically forced to align with a lot of right and far right. So there are many of those elements in his government as well. But the leftists don't want that. So they're on the streets and they're getting help from American organizations, again, that are getting money from the United States. What we did today is an article outlining the history of progressives and Democrats here in the United States that dates back to Bill Clinton's time, that have, inserted themselves, interfered with Israeli politics to sabotage Israel's right-wing politicians and policies. So we know that President Obama, for example, interfered with the re-election of Bibi Netanyahu. He tried to sabotage that. We know that President Carter, the former president, wrote in his book about Israel and trying to undermine their government there. But we give many, many examples as to why the left in the United States has a fixation on destroying Israel's right. And that's the article up at the Foreign Desk today.
Lisa, militaries in both Canada and the United States are having a pretty tough time right now recruiting. Well, now there's word that the U.S. Armed Forces may be ditching its so-called woke image. Do you think that'll help?
Let's see. I mean, it's very difficult to shake this image after it's been so weakened, right? So you think of the people who want to go to the military. They love their country. They believe in strength, physical, mental, emotional strength, right? You go to fight for your country and you have to have all of those elements. And then you have the military that has been completely overturned away from those elements. And now it's more like, let's question the United States. We're guilty. We have this image of, hating the country, using pronouns instead of worrying about, the enemy and defending our borders and defending our assets overseas. So it's going to be very difficult to recruit this generation of recruits when this is now the image of the military. They're going to have to do a lot of backpedaling. They're going to have to do a lot of rebranding. Maybe they should bring in some really good PR experts to help do that. But I'm glad that they're coming to their senses and at least reflecting a bit and saying what has happened. We are so behind. We are so weakened by our own woke policies that I hope that this is not just a headline, but that they truly will think about this and the damage that it has done, not only to the military, but to the country as a whole.
You know, what's interesting as well, I've chatted with some recent immigrants who came to our country and our province here in Alberta, and they're leaving war-torn countries. They're like, I don't want to go into war. I don't want to join the military. I escaped that, and I'm came to Canada for peace. So that's why the Canadian military is having a difficult time as well recruiting.
Right. I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? When you think about, what that means to people. I think people's psyche as a whole has changed, particularly after the pandemic and as a result of this woke, kind of mentality. When you think about the military, also as we grew up, it was, even sports and anything else, competitive. You want to be the best. You want to, break your own record and everybody else's record, in the mile run at school. You want to, you really want to be the best. And I think that has been lost on this newer generation. And that is a result of woke policies and woke mentality that's being, preached at schools and in the media and just overall, everyone gets a trophy. Well, if everyone gets a trophy, why should I go fight for my country? If everyone gets a trophy, why should I be the one to be at training at 4 a.m.? I'd rather be playing video games at midnight, So there is this level of not wanting to commit to something that is, regimented and is, requires a lot of sacrifice, particularly if there is no connection to the bigger cause, and that's patriotism, nationalism, believing in your country, believing in the military. So I think it's going to be an upwards battle for every country in the West right now because of this new psyche of our culture.
Lisa, before we let you go, you're in Los Angeles, not far from Hollywood. We had the Oscars, and Brendan Fraser, the American-Canadian actor, winning for Best Actor for The Whale. Were you kind of surprised by that?
No, not surprised at all. He's a wonderful actor, and I'm glad that the Canadians got an award. And I'm glad that you're all celebrating today in Canada. I didn't catch the show, but I did catch some of the highlights, and I was very, very happy for him. So congrats to you all.
I was surprised that Austin Butler, who portrayed Elvis, didn't win. That was kind of who I was pulling for, to be honest with you.
Oh.
It was such an incredible movie. Elvis, I'm a big Elvis fan.
There were a lot of good nominees this year. That's very true.
Absolutely. She's our foreign affairs expert, U.S. political reporter, and even talks a little entertainment sometimes. Lisa Daftari, thanks for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.